Our application team comes to us and says, we've got this new tiered web application for widgets, and we want to make absolutely sure our widget is isolated from the rest of the network, except for incoming web connections. We're going to use automation to spin up a production and development environment. It would be great if we could use the same IPs in each environment, so we can just use static IPs in our automation code. We're also worried about separating our app layer from the front end, so we want to secure that with an L7 firewall. This is a really hard problem to solve if we had to do this in the physical network with VLANs and physical firewalls. Let's see how we solve it with flow networking. Prism Central already has all the VMs that make up the application, both the development and production. So if we navigate over to the new Network and Security Virtual Private Cloud section, what we see is we have created a production widget VPC. And inside of this VPC that holds all of those production VMs, we have a number of subnets. So we have a 10.1.1 for our front end, and so on for each layer of the application, including one for that firewall or security part of the app. And we have the same exact set of subnets for our development application. And you'll note that the IP address range is identical between these, so that these developers can deploy this app and use the same address space. So if we navigate back to the virtual machine, what we see for example, the front-end production widget VM, we can look at the VM through this new improved GUI, and we see that it has a subnet assigned to it that's in production, and it's part of the production VPC. And when we edit the NIC, we can see that the connected subnet is selected here in the traditional NIC network selection screen. And this is what connects that VM to the production front-end network. Now, how do we get traffic into this virtual machine? Here we're going to use floating IP addresses. We'll navigate back to Network and Security and select Floating IPs. Here we have several IPs, and the address ending in 104.74 is associated with the production VPC and that front-end widget VM. We can navigate to that IP address of the floating IP, and we see that it loads the production widget web page, and everything seems to be working as expected. So if we go back to the floating IP address, we can change this association. So just navigate to Update, and instead of the production VM, we can select the development VM. So this modifies that floating IP address to associate it to a VM inside of a different VPC. As soon as that update completes, we can navigate back to the floating IP address, refresh the page, and we see that now the development widget has loaded with the universal symbol for a website under development. So just like that, we've used the floating IP address to swap between a production and development VPC. Now, let's add another layer of security by navigating to the production VPC policies page. Here we have a policy that allows all inbound traffic to the production front end, and a second policy that takes traffic from the front end to the application and redirects that through another VM in an additional subnet. And that's that layer 7 firewall VM. So here's what a view of policy looks like. We can select our sources and destinations, and then we can choose our action, which is reroute, allow, or block. In just a few minutes, we've allowed the application team to choose their own reusable network address space, easily spin up new versions of their app, and even add layers of security. What would have taken weeks in the physical network now happens in just a few clicks or a few API calls.